If you're trying to hit 1,000 monthly listeners on Spotify, I'm going to show you exactly what you need to do in this video. Thank you for joining. Let's talk about what you need to do to actually increase your reach and increase your engagement on Spotify. This is not a go viral strategy. I'm not going to tell you to DM 500 playlist curators or will it into existence somehow. This is a practical, repeatable path to your first real milestone, 1,000 monthly listeners. So why 1,000 listeners? Well, because it matters. It means real traction, real humans, real momentum. And 1,000, it's achievable. It's not easy, but it actually is within reach. It's used in a lot of different areas. You may have heard of like super fans, the whole super fan angle, where if you get 1,000 super fans who are willing to spend $100 a year on your stuff, that's $100,000 per year. And, your dream of doing nothing but music for a living becomes within reach. Now, 1,000 monthly listeners is not the same thing as 1,000 super fans, but it's still a great milestone. So let's break down what it actually takes. First, I want to define exactly what a monthly listener is, so we've got clarity on that. 1,000 monthly listeners does not mean 1,000 followers. It does not mean 1,000 streams, and it does not mean 1,000 plays on one song. It means 1,000 unique accounts streaming your music in a rolling 28-day window. So if one person streams you one time, that counts as one monthly listener. If that same person streams you 50 times, that still counts as one monthly listener. It does not stack per stream. You need 1,000 unique different people who've streamed you at least once in the last 28 days. Now, also to be clear, it does not mean 500 people streaming 2 songs or 250 streaming 4 songs. It's actually 1,000 unique accounts. So this is about reach, not volume. But there's one other important part. If those listeners don't engage, if they don't save your music, if they don't replay it, the algorithm is not going to help you out. You really need reach combined with engagement. So let's talk a little bit about that. Most artists never hit this milestone for a few different reasons. One, they don't release consistently. Sometimes they think that Spotify is somehow going to just discover them. Maybe they're chasing playlist placements instead of building demand. Often they're just treating music like art only. If you build it, they will come, and they don't realize that there's a distribution element that really has to be there. Understand that Spotify is not a discovery platform. The algorithm isn't going around trying to find great new music. It's a reaction platform. It's reacting to signals that it receives. So if people show up and provide these signals, the algorithm is going to push you further. If nobody shows up, or if they don't engage and provide these signals, then nothing happens. So the obvious question is, okay, so how do we send those signals? Well, there's actually 3 levers that you can pull related to this. One is having a release strategy. The other lever is traffic generation, and then optimizing the algorithm. So let's go through each of these one at a time. Lever 1 is the release strategy. For this, you need catalog depth. If you only have 2 songs out, you're really asking the algorithm to take you seriously with almost no data to work with. You want to have at least 4 to 6 strong singles, but warning, don't release them all at once because that will count as just a single release. You really want to take advantage of each one of them being a separate release. So really a single about every 4 to 6 weeks is about right. Say once a month. And then you'll need 4 to 6 songs out and combine that with some strong artwork and some cohesive branding. That's also important too for the algorithm, but also for the audience. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on. And so why do you want to have this many releases? And that's because every release hits release radar, which I'll talk about in a minute. It creates new algorithm data and it expands the entry points into your account. So more songs equals more surfaces for discovery. So more ways for people to get in and find you. Consistency is very important though. Catalog cohesion is very important. Spotify's algorithm favors clear listener patterns. So what that really means is if you release, say, one metal track and one acoustic folk track and one EDM remix and a jazz ballad, you're really confusing the machine because you're going to get people coming in from all sorts of backgrounds and the algorithm isn't going to know what to make of it. You're also confusing your audience, but really we're aiming for the algorithm here, and it is a pattern recognition mechanism. So you really want a clear genre to increase the confidence of the algorithm, and that will increase the probability of it recommending you to different playlists and things like that. So think of consistency as fuel for the algorithm. Now we've talked about lever one, the release strategy. Let's move on to lever two, which is traffic generation. Spotify does not discover you because you're a great vocalist or because you're very soulful or a great instrumentalist. It really discovers you because people show up and they engage with you. So you need controlled traffic. There are two types of Spotify growth to think about. One of them is external traffic that's coming in that you can cause to trigger the algorithm, but there's also things you can do within the platform to optimize that algorithm. We're going to talk about both of those, but let's start with that external push. One of the fastest controlled growth ways is through meta ads. So you can run conversion ads to Spotify where people click here to go to your Spotify account. You can do engagement ads to build warm audiences, retargeting ads and stuff like that. Although this is the fastest controlled growth strategy, I really don't recommend it. And the reason is that in order to do this correctly, you really need to pay a lot of attention to it and spend a fair amount of money. What you're going to do is create ad sets of say 3 ads, and you're going to run them for a week or so at like $10 per day. And after that, the algorithm is going to start sending them to different people that match what you're advertising. The algorithm is really amazingly good at this. It knows pretty much everything about everybody. So it will direct your ads to the people that are most likely to respond to it, but you pay for that. So $10 per day to run these 3 ads. Then after a week or two, you go to another set of 3 ads that are totally different and run those for a week or so, and then maybe a third set. And then you'll get a pattern of, which ads are working and which ones aren't. And you put those working ads together in a set and you start actually generating a lot of traffic. But you've spent hundreds of dollars to do this, and you spent a lot of time analyzing this and creating the ads and all of that. So for that reason, even though it is the fastest method of controlled growth, I really don't recommend it for most people, just because of the attention required, the time, and the money that's involved there. So another way you can do this, though, is just with short form content. This is the most sustainable method, actually. And this is things like YouTube Shorts or Instagram Reels, TikTok. As far as which one is the best, a lot of people think everybody's on TikTok now. You got to get on TikTok. Well, when you look at the numbers, that's not necessarily true. TikTok has roughly 1.5 to 2 billion monthly active users, which is a lot. That's just a little bit over a quarter of the world's population every month logging into TikTok. But YouTube has 2.5 to 3 billion monthly active users, which is significantly bigger. And when you start talking about Meta's family of apps includes Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, Messenger, and others. It reaches over 3 billion people every day. That's over a third of the planet logging into some Meta platform every single day. So its overall reach is significantly larger than TikTok or YouTube. Not that they're bad platforms and there's strategies to utilize those, but if you're going to pick one, pick Meta and learn how to do the short content on that to reach the most people. When you create these posts, it can be several different things. It could be the hook or chorus to your latest release, 15 to 30 seconds at the most, not too long. It can be behind the scenes studio moments. It can be little micro stories about the song, or it could be something like, if you like this, you'll probably like that. I recommend focusing on telling micro stories. So for example, saying something like, I have a new release. Well, that just sucks. Nobody cares. Honestly, nobody cares. If you say something like, my band tried to kill me and I wrote this song, that's something that people are going to stop and go, what the heck is that about? And actually take a look and see. This is kind of what they refer to as a loop, where you plant a seed that causes them to follow through to find out the rest of the story. Think about that when you're actually leading them with your intro to your short content, that sort of thing. Think about ways to plant that seed of interest, some kind of a curiosity trigger, but then they have to follow through in order to find out the end of the story. Don't post full songs. That defeats the purpose. And really your goal is to funnel traffic to Spotify. That's the whole point of these things. You're not selling a track, you're really selling curiosity. So if these people listen all the way through to your songs on Spotify, if they save the song, if they replay it, all of these show Spotify that you've got strong engagement. and that traffic will create data, but engagement is what determines whether the algorithm pushes you forward. We've talked about lever one, release strategy, and lever two, traffic generation. Let's spend a little bit of time talking about lever three, which is in-platform optimization. This is partially an outcome of the first two levers, but there are some things you can do to optimize it. Basically, there are three different feeds that go into the algorithm: release radar, discover weekly, and radio. So let me briefly explain what each of these are and how you can use them. First of all, release radar, what it is a personalized playlist that Spotify generates every Friday featuring new releases from artists a listener follows or has recently engaged with. You've probably seen these. If you go into Spotify, you'll get a new playlist there that will be filled with artists that you know. And it's like, oh, that's great. I can listen to that. It's going to be stuff that I like. This is what we're talking about here. So who sees you in their release radar? Well, it's going to be your followers, but there's also going to be people who have recently streamed your music. And sometimes listeners Spotify thinks are similar or will like what you do. It'll just kind of randomly put them in there. Why this matters is because this is your first algorithmic test group for every release that you do. So if people listen all the way through, if they save the song, if they replay it, Spotify is more likely to expand the track beyond your existing audience. So think about release radar as your launch runway. Another input to the algorithm is Discover Weekly. This personalized playlist gets updated every Monday, and it recommends new music based on a listener's behavior. So how you get into this is Spotify's algorithm looks at who listens to you, what else those listeners listen to, the playlist context, save behavior, and completion rate, all this stuff we've talked about. And if your listeners overlap strongly with fans of similar artists, Spotify may insert your track into Discover Weekly for those audiences. This is where a real expansion actually starts to happen because you're being shown to people who've never heard of you before, but behave like your audience behaves. So it's like algorithmic matchmaking. Now, the third input is radio. This is algorithm-generated listening sessions based on a song or on an artist. So there's, song radio, there's artist radio, and there's autoplay, which is what happens when a playlist or an album ends. It keeps playing other stuff that's related. That would be autoplay radio. So how you get into this, if your track performs well with certain listener clusters, Spotify may insert it into radio streams for similar users. This is a silent thing where momentum starts to compound in the background quietly, but it can happen really fast. It doesn't have the hype of Discover Weekly, but it can generate consistent daily streams if the engagement data is strong. So to kind of recap these three in short, Release Radar is testing your existing audience, Discover Weekly is introducing you to new audiences, and radio is reinforcing that inside of listener behavior loops. Now, to optimize Release Radar properly, understand that every new release goes to your followers' release radar and your listeners' release radar. So what most artists do wrong is they'll just drop a song and hope it gets on there somehow. What you really need to do is drive your existing audience to heavily stream your new music, your new release, within the first 72 hours. You want a high save rate. You want people to listen to it all the way through, low skips, and replays, also very important. You should be developing a list of fans either through email or whatever you've got. Send them a message, text your fans, DM your super fans, tell them to listen all the way through, to save the song, to add it to a playlist if they have one. That alone can push you into algorithmic radio stations. Now, if you have Spotify for Artists, you can also pitch for editorial access. Every release lets you submit one song to Spotify editorial. To submit the song, you basically upload it through your distributor, whether that be DistroKid or CD Baby, TuneCore, whoever. It's a good idea to schedule it at least 7 days in advance. 14 is better if you want full Release Radar visibility, so that would be safer. Then you log into Spotify for Artists, go to Music, Upcoming, select the unreleased track, click Pitch a Song, fill out a form, and then hit Submit. Now, this process is probably going to be different by the time you watch this video. It should be something similar to that, though. You should be able to figure it out. It doesn't guarantee that you're going to get on a playlist, but it does flag the track for algorithmic visibility. It improves the Release Radar targeting. And when you pitch, be specific about your genre. Be very specific about the mood, about the instrumentation, and reference comparable artists. The more clearly Spotify can categorize you, the better the algorithm is going to match for you. Now, a lot of times, algorithmic expansion starts with playlists, but people tend to aim for these really big major playlists with, hundreds of thousands of listeners. The trouble is that it's really hard to get on those lists because there's so much traffic, and often they're going to charge you for getting on there, even if they do like your music. So you don't have to start with that. The algorithm will actually notice just putting it on your own personal playlist and submit to small independent playlists. When listeners add your track to their own playlists, Spotify sees contextual placement. So by the way, it's really important when you do that, that you're also very specific about your genre. Don't throw a bunch of different genres into one playlist. Make different playlists if you have to, but make sure that each one is very specific and targeted for a genre so that you don't confuse not only your listeners, but the algorithm. What the algorithm is going to see is your song keeps appearing in things called late night indie or melancholy rock, and it's going to build a behavioral cluster around you because of that. So that's going to help discover weekly matching. And just in general, the algorithm is going to really do well for you. So when you do go out to an independent playlist, all you got to do is tell them, I've got a new release here. If this fits one of your playlists, please add it. Appreciate you. Thank you very much. That's all you got to do. It's very simple, but it's very underused and much more powerful than people take advantage of. Now, one of the strongest signals that Spotify tracks is the save rate when people save your song. You can influence that by asking for it clearly in your call to action. You can also help it by releasing strong hooks when you write the songs. Put your strong hooks really early in the song. Avoid 45-second intros and long fade outs. With modern music, they really have no patience. They're going to slide right by it. They're going to swipe away before they get past the intro. And long fade outs are just generally kind of considered old school, unless the song really calls for it. There are times where it's actually still really cool. But in general, modern music doesn't have long intros, doesn't have long fade outs and all that. So this production strategy, it's going to help with the platform behavior also. You want to build your followers also. We talked a little bit about how followers are not the same as monthly listeners, but they are very important because they feed release radar and they signal recurring interest. So if you can get your monthly listeners to convert to followers, that can be very, very powerful. If you do it steadily, then every new release has a larger initial test group that's going to compound and help out a lot. So you can directly ask your monthly listeners to please follow me on Spotify. Most artists never ask, and so it just doesn't happen as often as it could. Well, let's talk a little bit more about this whole call to action stuff, because I know a lot of artists are really hesitant to seem pushy or salesy or, offend their fans or whatnot. But really, they shouldn't. They really shouldn't. First of all, half of the world is probably going to have an issue with what you're doing anyway. That's just the way people are. But again, all you need is that 1,000 super fans to really do what you want to do in the end, which is support yourself 100% doing music. So if you don't tell people what you want them to do, whether it's click this button or follow me on Spotify or whatever it is, if you don't give them that call to action, odds are they're never going to do it and you're never going to get where you want to go. You need to tell people to save the song, tell them to add it to a playlist, tell them to follow you and do it directly. A high save rate tells the algorithm that this isn't just passive listening. These are actively engaged people. So to wrap this up, if you release consistently, if you drive traffic to your Spotify site consistently, if you focus on engagement and you stay in one sonic lane long enough to build an identity, you could realistically reach 1,000 monthly listeners in a 3 to 6 month period. That's not overnight, but it's definitely achievable. It's not luck, it's just system behavior over a period of, say, 90 days. You will get there. 1,000 monthly listeners isn't about going viral. It's really about behaving like a serious artist long enough for the algorithm to work. Now, if you want help building that system, whether it's production, audio engineering, positioning, or release strategy, please subscribe to this channel. That's my call to action, by the way, because artists who grow are the ones who really treat this seriously. And if you're watching this, you probably already do.